Duran Parsi is a young entrepreneur in the esports world. While still at university in his 20s, Duran founded Collegiate Starleague, also known as CSL, the world's first collegiate gaming organization. Over the past 11 years, CSL hosted competitions for over 100,000 college students across 2,000 universities. Duran helped provide over $1 million in scholarship funding to student gamers. In 2015, Duran sold CSL to World Gaming, and currently, Duran is the Director of Collegiate Esports at FACEIT, which is an esports platform with over 15 million registered users. FACEIT was founded in London in 2012 and is one of the top gaming league administrators in the world. We are truly lucky to have Duran join us today to discuss the challenges of building a business in the esports world. But also, where did the world of collegiate esports start and where is it heading? Thank you for joining us today, Duran.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're really intrigued with your story, not only because you were able to build a successful business, particularly when you were younger, but my interest and Luke's interest started to really grow when we started to read about your goodbye post to CSL community. You spoke about how gaming has changed your life and has kept you away from making different poor decisions. Can you kind of tell us a little bit more about that and how you think your life would be different if you didn't have gaming?
Oh, sure. I think when I was younger, I guess my family situation wasn't the best, and there were a lot of drug users and things like that in my family. And so I think that gaming was pretty much the thing that sort of kept me inside, literally, instead of like going out and kind of like being around the various different people and things that I would have otherwise like been able to sort of access and be exposed to very easily. So for me, it was it was a way to, it was an escape in a lot of ways, but it was also kind of like a social tool that I was able to sort of use to make friendships and things like that I really wouldn't have had the opportunity to do otherwise. Like it really established my relationship with my cousin, who's one of my best friends, and we really bonded over video games primarily. And so yeah, I mean, I think I think that's definitely a big one. And then prior to like actually working in the gaming industry as a job, I studied political science, and I was in DC, and I was interning at a think tank. And so I think if esports hadn't have become a thing for me, I would probably still be living in DC, working on the Hill, or something like that, which is still something I'm passionate and interested in. But I'm just happy that sort of like the confluence of things in my life put me here. I like where I'm at.
No, I think it's, is that something you're aware of when it was happening, when you were younger? Is that something that you kind of said, oh, this is something I'd rather be doing than what's going on in my personal life?
I mean, it's just, when I was younger, when I was very young, it was just playing games because that's just, easy to sort of distract myself and play StarCraft for 15 hours. And then, when I was in high school and stuff, it was like, I want to be competitive and be good. And so I'm, playing in tournaments and things like that. And so I'm playing, with more of a purpose, I guess, at that point, to like actively, like I'm training versus just like mindlessly playing for hours on end. But I mean, like the aspect of gaming as sort of a career pathway was definitely nowhere to be found in my brain.
You talked about playing competitions at school. Did you have an esports club while you were at school, or was that still something that really wasn't happening yet either?
I created it when I went to UC San Diego, which was like basically probably the first esports club or one of the first esports clubs on any campus. I remember when I got accepted, literally the first thing I did was post on Team Liquid and say like, hey, who goes to UCSD? Let's start an esports club. That was like the actual first thing I did when I got in. Um, but yeah, I mean, at that point, the esports clubs today are like real organized and massive organization. Most esports clubs are like the largest club on campus out of any type of student org. And our esports club was 80 people in a Facebook group, and we met in the math lab twice a week and played StarCraft. So it, that was basically what esports clubs were, 10 years ago, and today they're a whole different animal.
Interesting. You're saying that the esport club nowadays are big companies, but I saw in your biography you were a general manager for the Fnatic StarCraft. Was that before your study or
That was
during?
when I was in college. So yeah, I mean, I played StarCraft competitively, and I was one of the more well-known people in North America, I guess. And then when StarCraft 2 was coming out in 2009 or whatever, when everyone was hyped about it, I was contacted by Fnatic, and they basically said that they're wanting to sort of expand into StarCraft and invest in building a StarCraft team, and they asked me if I wanted to do that. So I did. I went over to Fnatic, and we built the StarCraft team. And then when StarCraft 2 came out, we transitioned to StarCraft 2, and for that first 2 years of StarCraft 2, we were probably along with like Team Liquid, I think the most successful non-Korean StarCraft team for those first 2 years. So yeah, that was fun. I was playing a little bit, but not that much at that point.
Okay. I'm very curious because nowadays Fnatic is a big team. I'm curious how it was founded in 2004 from what I saw in my research. So it seems that you were quite early working with them in the journey. How did it look compared to what it is now?
I think, I mean, even back then, Fnatic was probably the largest esports team. It's just the nature of esports teams, I think, have like changed very dramatically. Like, I mean, Fnatic, even with Fnatic, we were one of the first few teams to have actual jerseys. At that time, most of the teams were still just having t-shirts and things like that. So Fnatic was ahead of the curve in a lot of areas. But yeah, I mean, it was I guess just finances were much smaller back then. We were paying our StarCraft 2 players like $300-400 a month, and that, like, at that time, that was like a huge salary for a gamer. um, like maybe like the top CS:GO people were earning like 2,000 a month or something. And I mean, I think that's kind of one of the bigger differences. Just like the whole world of professional teams now is just so much different. Everything is VC funded, and there's like millions and millions of dollars. And at that time, I don't know, I definitely not super aware of all the sort of back finances of everything, but we were funded by sponsors, and margins were really tight. And I imagine that Sam Matthews and Anne, his mom, who was actively involved in Fnatic at the time. I don't know if she still is, but I'm certain that they were using some of their own money and everything too, and to try to push things forward. So it is definitely fun to think back on that, and think back on how we were, where I was sort of involved at like a early stage of like where I think I've written about this or talked about it in some place, but like I think that when StarCraft 2 came out, that sort of like modern era of esports was really began 2010, 2011 with StarCraft 2 and Twitch. So it's pretty cool to be involved in that kind of at those early stages.
Did you ever want to be a professional yourself, or did you give it a crack?
I don't know if there was like there wasn't really a definition of pro gamer when I was like actually playing competitively, but like I was I was a player and manager for the USA national team for StarCraft. I played in WCGs. I never, I was probably like a top 10 to 20 player in the States. Like I was able to beat really good players in LAN events, but I never won major tournaments. But I would be able to qualify for them and then lose.
Yeah.
So I was, I was better than average people, but not quite at the level of like the actual top players, basically.
Yeah, I think both Luke and I can relate to that with different parts of our life. But you studied.
There was definitely like a big there was sort of like a gap in skill that like I reached a certain point but never could crack the barrier, I guess.
Do you know what the gap was? Do you think, is it just time in game, or is it certain abilities that you reflect on?
I think mechanics probably. I was never. Especially StarCraft being one of the more mechanically intensive games ever made, that was a limiting factor for me personally. Like I wasn't as fast or precise as a lot of people, and I think just like strategy and execution. One thing that I actually had that a lot of people didn't have is I actually played much better at live events than I did online. Like I was able to beat players even in StarCraft 2 when I actually never actively played. I was able to beat like some top players in LAN events that I like would probably lose 100 times out of 100 in online settings. So I had that aspect to my game. But I think like mechanically and just strategically, I was always like a little bit behind other people.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that. I was always better not at the event and away from the event. I was reverse, which is not good when you want to be a top athlete or performer in anything. But that was just one of my things I needed to work on. You studied law. And you obviously completed your degree. When did the pathway down CSL kind of start to begin? You started getting some traction while you're still studying, or is it post?
Yeah. So I think a couple things. I sold CSL when I was in my first year at law school. But the reason for going to law school in the first place was, essentially I had co-founded North American Starleague, and that was my full-time job for some number of years. And at the end of 2012, I quit to try to focus on CSL full time. That was one of the reasons. There are a bunch of reasons why I left, but one of the reasons was I kind of felt like up till that point, CSL had always just been like a hobby. Like, here's a thing that I'm doing that's kind of fun for me. And it's just like a part-time thing to do on weekends and as a hobby. And kind of around that time, I first started thinking of CSL as like an actual company, and this can actually go somewhere. So I quit my job, and I said I'm going to focus on this full time, and really try to push it forward. And then in like 2014, so after having done that for like 2 years, the company was growing, but I wasn't making money yet from it. And up till that point, I was basically just living off of my savings essentially, and I was getting to a point where I was running low on money, and unfortunately, my family is not in a position to support me or anything. So my dad basically gave me like an ultimatum, and he said like, if you don't figure this thing out soon, like stop wasting your time on video games and like go get a real job basically, because I can't support you. So I had previously used my grad school loan money to fund CSL in like 2012 and 2013. So I sort of thought, well, I'll just go back to school and use student loan money again. And essentially the plan at that point was, I'll go to law school because that's something that I kind of wanted to do for some time anyways. And essentially I told myself, okay, I'm giving myself a 3-year window basically, where either CSL will sort of take off and become sustainable for me as a career, or B, at the end of the 3 years, if it doesn't, then I'll become a lawyer. And it just so happens that this acquisition opportunity came up in my first year. So I was able to kind of do both, and I was happy that the folks at World Gaming and then Cineplex, who acquired World Gaming that same year, were supportive of me continuing to go to school while still running the company. I was definitely happy that they were that they allowed me to do that. And then at that point, I just said, as long as I don't fail out of law school, I'll just keep going and see how long I can do it. And somehow I graduated. So, and I'm in massive debt now, so there's also that.
Well, you founded Collegiate Esports with student loan, so
yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. Pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I found very inspiring from your story is, with the new esport bubble, I hear with a lot of, either when I discuss with my colleagues or with different people that just see the surface of esport. They see and they're just saying, oh, but these guys are making money out of playing games, and they don't see like all the effort and the passion that was put behind, and like even the teams, like as you said, for Fnatic, they started and they put their own money and their own time and effort in building those things that finally paid off after so many years.
Yeah.
I just want to take a little bit, like a little journey through how you built TSL, and from my research, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but you started, like this all started around 2009 when you sent a message and you wanted to start organizing StarCraft player together.
Yep. Yeah. So basically, when I went to UC San Diego, when I first got in, first thing I did was start a StarCraft club, because that was pretty much the only thing I did at that point. And then my roommate's friend one day told me that the tech club on campus was hosting a big StarCraft tournament, and especially at that time, because I was still like less than a year removed from like actively playing 10 hours a day and competing and stuff. I was like, okay, I'll go to this tournament. It's gonna be easy to win and everything, because at that time I'm like, I know who all the good StarCraft players are, and none of them are here, so I should be able to win this easily. So I showed up, and the first thing I noticed was that there's like, I think we had like 70 or 80 players sign up for the tournament. So that was like, wow, there's a lot of people that play StarCraft here. And then I also found that there are actually a lot of players that were really good. UC San Diego has a lot of Asian students, and not to be stereotypical, but Koreans are very good at StarCraft in general. and there actually there was a student there who when he was younger in high school in Korea, because he was a exchange, or he was a foreign student. He actually was like on some of the pro teams as like a practice partner. So they're actually like really legitimate good players there, and that was just super cool for me. And so, you know, through that weekend, I was just talking and made friends with a lot of those guys. And basically, I asked them if they were interested in making a team and playing against other schools. So then, you know, most of them were interested. So pretty much first thing I did after that was I just went on Team Liquid again, because that's where the whole StarCraft community really lived. And I just made a post, and I said, hey, I go to UC San Diego, and I have a team of people like looking for other StarCraft players at the other UC schools. Let's make a league. And I ended up finding players at every other school, and they all put together teams, and we made a league. And then at the same time, pretty much the exact same time as that was happening, Princeton put together a StarCraft team, and there's a whole Ivy League rivalry with MIT, and they had this big exhibition match against MIT. And the person who organized that, who's one of my good friends now, Mona, she contacted me, and she wanted to work together on this league called CSL. And at first I wasn't interested. And then later that summer, we kept in touch and we kept talking, and then basically decided, like, you know, instead of me trying to run a league and her trying to run a league separately, we'll just join up and run one singular league. So yeah, basically that's kind of how that happened. And the idea was just like, you know, one, holy shit, there's just like so many StarCraft players at my school, and I just had no clue. You know, I thought I knew all of the StarCraft players, but I was just like shocked at how many there were. And then the second one was, you know, both of us, myself and Mona, and, you know, many other people, I used to go to Day 9, like when he was in college, like we used to have watch parties at his dorm, where we would, you know, watch all the Korean leagues on TV, you know, 2, 3 in the morning with like a handful of friends and stuff. And, you know, Mona was the same way. She would stay up late all night watching, you know, Korean pro games and stuff. And, you know, the thing that we wanted to do is like, we wanted to bring that over to the States. And, you know, since we were both in college at the time, and, you know, we discovered there are lots of StarCraft players on campus, we're like, hey, let's do a league and let's see what we can do. So yeah, that's pretty much like the sort of genesis of how this started.
Very cool. And along this journey, at what point did you start realizing, okay, this is I mean, there are many players that want to get involved in the league, and it seems that the opportunity is there. At what point of the journey did you start realizing this is like a company opportunity, something that I can make a career of?
Probably, I mean, like realistically, you know, around, you know, 2012, you know, when I was working at NASL, you know, we were the first like daily broadcast studio solely dedicated to esports in North America. You know, we put on the first like big 6-figure prize tournaments. And, you know, so, and that year or the year before, like mid 2011 is when NASL picked up investment money, and we were able to grow our studio and like really expand what we were doing. So that I get like that kind of opened my eyes to like esports. This is actually a thing that can be an actual career versus like oh hey, I'm really just happy I'm making a paycheck doing a thing right now, but like this is like a thing that can actually give me a real career versus, you know, at that time I was making like $1,000 a month and that was my job, and I was, you know, working, you know, 50, 60 hours a week. But at that time I was like, oh, this is a real possibility. And then, you know, that year for CSL, we had over 320 schools competing that year, and that was individual universities with StarCraft teams, which is like insane to think about now because very few people play StarCraft anymore. But at one time, we actually had 300 actual schools with teams of at least 5 people, and then that just like that growth trajectory was literally starting with 25 teams to 50 teams to 75 to 100 to 320. It was like, oh my god, this, like, there's something here, and it's, I think there's something here. So I was like, I'm just gonna go all in on this idea and see what happens.
So you mentioned that you were working 50 hours a week, 50, 60 hours a week. I want to jump a little bit into this, and I think this is part of building a business. Like a lot of entrepreneurs understand like the hard work that has to be put into the passion to deliver like the project that they want to build. But I want to know, what are the hard memory that you remember from your journey, and if there were any moment where it was hard and you were still able to push through.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were tons of hard moments for sure. Most of them, I would say, just even not even thinking about CSL, but back to my time at NESL. When we first started, there were literally our 2 casters full time, and then us in the studio. There was 3 of us, and I knew nothing about production and broadcasting or anything, and my job, that wasn't my job. My job was to run the league itself. That's what I did. I ran tournaments and events. But our studio had 3 people, so I had to learn how to, run streams. I had to learn about how all that stuff worked, how to set up broadcasting equipment, how to do all that stuff. I had to do that. I had to run leagues. I had to do everything. And so that was a challenge, a fun challenge, but it was it was a lot. I think one of the early struggles there was our season 2 finals, which was in December of 2011, and I was in grad school at the time in Washington D.C., and so I I had to basically plan our $300,000-$400,000 live event, which at the time was a massive number. Big lands are multi-million dollars now, but back then $300,000-$400,000 was our big year-end event, and trying to plan out logistics and everything for that event in LA when I was living in Washington, going to school in Washington D.C. was a challenge. And then having to leave school, fly back to LA for the event, which was in December, so it was right around finals time. I went and basically I flew back on a Tuesday, and we were basically at the event setting up. And again, small company, so like I'm setting up banners, I'm setting up the stage, I'm setting up streaming stuff. All day Tuesday, all day Wednesday, all day Thursday, and then the event, is Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then the hardest thing about that particular event was just very few people came. Our first event was huge. We sold out the convention center. We had like over 1,000 attendees. So we used the same venue, but we actually rented out a second hall because the attendance for the first event was so big. And for whatever reasons, we got like only like 200 people or something came to that event. So that one was tough to deal with, just putting in so much work, and then you like look out and then there's so many empty seats and stuff, and that was really challenging. And then immediately after the event was done, I took a red eye back to DC, and then I had a final Monday that I didn't study for, and then I had a paper due that I didn't write, and so that was like a really challenging time. And then another one with CSL was our first big live event with CSL at the end of 2012, and that was like the first big live event that we had ever done. Up until that point, CSL was basically just online. It's the first time, like, this is when I was using my student loan money, so I'm like, all right, cool, I've got money to put on a live event, like we're going to do this this year. And that was a very similar challenge, but the event was in Florida, so again, like, I'm trying to organize this big live event remotely, which is really difficult, especially at that time. Mona, who was my co-founder that year, was her senior year in college, and so she took like most of the year off of CSL. So I was like almost working alone that year. And then the biggest thing that happened is that we had a sponsor lined up, like an actual cash sponsor, which was very rare at that time, and that was I was relying on that cash, and even though it was only a couple $1,000s, like that was a huge part of our budget was that money, and I was relying on that for all of our production. And basically, like 3 weeks before the event, they pulled out the sponsorship, I guess, because a gaming peripherals company, and they essentially said that they had been planning on lining up the sponsorship with the release of a new product, and our event was going to like line up with the product release. So part of the idea for the event was to showcase the new product, and that release date was changed. So basically, they're like, "Hey, we're not sponsoring this anymore," and so that was just gone. So I had to cancel all of our production, and pretty much make something up on the fly. So we ordered some equipment and tried to cobble something together, which didn't work. And then Day 9 was our caster, and he was super awesome in just being accommodating and working with what we had, and he was trying to help, calling people he knew from Red Bull and other places. But yeah, we had to work with what we had at that time, and then on top of that, during the event, in the semifinals in a game, our streaming computer died midway through the broadcast. So like we just lost the stream, and our solution was we eventually got everything restarted, but since our main observer on the streaming computer wasn't there anymore, I was observing on like a Dell laptop that I had on the side. And so what we ended up doing was like pointing a camera at my computer screen, and then we had like Day 9 casting over my shoulder, and it was like a very ghetto solution. But that was like all over Reddit that weekend, which was pretty funny. Yeah, that event was a very big challenge, super stressful, but it was actually fun overall. Like it was like a really cool bonding experience for me and the rest of the team at the time, and the players. Even though like the conditions weren't great and everything, I think the players like had a lot of fun. The matches were really good, so it's like it turned out, I think, like reflecting on it was really nice, but sort of like in the moment it was sucked.
Yeah, I can relate probably to all the, I mean, not really in streaming, but being in software engineering, we deal with bugs all the time. So all the technical problems that, like the feeling, sometimes it's especially hard if you put a lot of effort into it. And it is like, for example, when we do demonstration of the software, if there is a bug in the middle of the demo,
yes,
and you prepared for like 6 months, and everyone is judging you on that one moment. And I think for you, it was like kind of, what must have been hard is it seems that you were working alone in terms of like in the leadership of the company, mostly alone in some of those moments, and then facing those challenges might have put you down. I mean, it could have put a lot of people down. I want to know maybe if you can share us a little bit your feeling around why is it that you did not give up and what drove you into pushing through.
Um, I guess I guess at that point it was like, you know, how old was I? 24. So I'm like, you know, I don't have a family or anything, and I just don't like giving up. I'm very stubborn. Um, and I think like honestly, one of my strengths for whatever reason is that I just don't give up. You know, like a lot of the early competitors that we had in the collegiate esports scene, um, you know, they're all gone, and I'm still doing this just because like I just never stop. I'm just like, you know, but I think like the thing that I always told myself from day one of like trying to turn turn this into like a business and a career, actual career for myself was, I'm gonna keep doing this as long as I'm having fun. Like as long as 51% of the time I'm enjoying myself, you know, there's more fun moments than there are not fun moments, that I'm gonna keep doing it. And so I feel like whenever I like personally, like whenever I'm going through challenges, and not even like back then the early challenges, but even, you know, bigger challenges, like, you know, at the end of my CSL journey when we're, you know, dealing with, you know, a parent company, Cineplex, who's a theater chain that's going through a lot of financial problems, and we're cutting budgets, and I'm like, oh, how do I like try to make cuts, budget cuts? Like it's a whole different set of issues that I was dealing with in 2020 than I was in 2012. But you know, the thing I always think about is like, whenever I'm going through those times, is like, okay, am I having more fun than I'm having not fun, basically? And if the answer is yes, I'm enjoying myself more than I'm not enjoying myself, then you know, I push through. Um, and for me personally, that's what it is. It's not necessarily, or it wasn't necessarily driven by, you know, yeah, I think this is gonna like scale exponentially at some point, so I'm gonna, you know, take losses today for profits tomorrow. For me, again, for me personally, it's just like, am I actually liking what I'm doing? And for so far, you know, with esports and collegiate esports in particular, the answer has always been yes, and so that's why I'm still doing it.
Yeah, I think that resonates with a lot of people. The concept that, you know, it's, I mean, it's a bit of cliche, right? But most of the time, people do say that same thing. You can find something you love doing. You never really work a day in your life. I know there's pressures around that financially, and hours,
Yeah.
and school, but I mean, you're still finding that opportunity and that ability to push through. When CSL was taken over by World Gaming, you still worked there for a little bit longer. You had the experience of working with Wim Stocks, who we've spoken to before, and he's had some pretty interesting experiences himself. What was it like working with Wim?
Wim, so it's funny, the when the acquisition first happened. So when the acquisition first happened, this was before World Gaming was acquired by Cineplex, and at that time, Wim wasn't the CEO at that point. I think he was an advisor or something. I don't actually know what his initial role was, but I had always heard him, like he was described in like very like mythical terms. And a lot of people are like, I've never even seen Wim, like he just like floats around at these events, but like hadn't seen him. And I remember we were at the first TwitchCon. We were doing a live event at the first ever TwitchCon in 2016, I think it was. And I actually met Wim for the first time. I was like, oh, this guy is very cool. I think, like, honestly, Wim is like knows everybody in the video game industry. So that's just like, it was just interesting to just kind of see, like, walking around an event with him, and like every single person, it's like knows him and has a personal story, or some sort of personal relationship with him. So I think that's actually like a really, for me personally, that's like a very admirable character trait, because that's like, I'm very shy and introverted. Like I can be outgoing, but like in general, I'm not going to be the person at an event that's like making the rounds and talking to everybody, and like but that's definitely him. And so, I always like admired that he kind of had that ability. So that's something that I always like, if there's something I want to learn from Wim, it's that. And then just generally, like, he just really likes gaming as an industry, and it's cool to see someone who's like from, I mean, I can say that I've been in esports since day one of esports, but Wim's been in video games since like day one of video games. So it's just neat. Yeah, just definitely like, yeah, it was nice working with him in many ways.
Interesting. So, I mean, we had a lot of fun, and it was really interesting to talk to Wim. And actually, he had a really fun story with Michael Jackson that I'm still laughing at when I listen to it in our first video. I want to move on to your current role. So you worked in Collegiate Starleague, you sold the company, and then you evolved the company to a point until 2020, when you decided that you wanted to part way, and now you're working at FACEIT as a director of Collegiate Esports. So I want to move around a little bit. What is your vision for the future for your career, and also for what you want to bring to the collegiate environment through that role?
Yep. So I think the difference between FACEIT and CSL, like notwithstanding the current direction of CSL, because I'm not involved anymore, so I'm not sure what that is. But as of a year ago, really CSL is a league. Everything centers around the league that we run. And the difference between that and FACEIT is like the fact that CSL's business model, like everything about CSL sort of revolves around the league itself, is very limiting in many ways, both from like a sort of like financial perspective, because our revenue, sponsors, things like that are all tied directly to the success of how big the league is. Everything we do is kind of tied directly to the league itself. FACEIT doesn't have that same limitation, because FACEIT itself is like a massive platform. Literally, almost 20 million people now. 700,000 users playing games on FACEIT every single day. So like, it's not the same where like, oh, I need to make sure the league itself gets like X number of participants, otherwise like, our business is screwed. So we don't have the same, like there's not a similar pressure, I think, to sort of really push a specific league forward. And because FACEIT's such a big platform, I think there's a lot more opportunities to like be creative with how I'm serving the collegiate community. Again, with CSL, it's like, okay, I need to do a league because that's the only thing that we can do. And like the platform that we had at CSL was literally only designed to operate a league. So again, with FACEIT, I can say, okay, well, we can use our platform tools, for example, to help esports clubs. We can give them access to, premium features. We can give them, FACEIT shop stuff. We can do a lot for esports clubs varsity programs that are trying to sort of build communities on their own campus, like through our platform. That's one. Two is obviously we can run leagues ourselves, which we're doing too. But again, that's like, I don't even view that as like the central piece of my goal. It's like, that's one of, 3 or 4 different things, where CSL, that was basically the only thing. So like the scope of what I can do myself and like through FACEIT to help the collegiate esports community is just much bigger. And then because FACEIT's a global platform, headquarters in London, and actually majority of our user base is not in the States. I think like 60% or more is in Europe. I have the ability to do things on a global scale. So it's like, hey, if we want to help build collegiate esports in Russia, we can do that, and we have a staff of people in Russian that speak Russian that can help us. If we want to do something in England, we can do that. If we want to create an internship program and have people, European students, come to the London office to intern with, our like production team, we can do stuff like that. Where again, with CSL, I just didn't have those opportunities. So I just think like the tools that I have available to help people is just much more here. So that's just super fun and exciting for me. And again, not driven by the same exact pressures as CSL, because FACEIT sort of like revenue and business model is just much different.
Yeah, I think it's. I was about to ask you, where do you think the next step is? I mean, you've watched collegiate esports grow within the US pretty much, and it's grown really at a pretty rapid pace. Looking at the timeline, and I was about to ask, what is the next step? And it sounds like you kind of answered that in the perspective of a global, international step, not just the US, but what else is out there. What do you think needs to be achieved from everyone, I guess, not just from what you can do at FACEIT, but what needs to be achieved for that to start working?
Yeah, I think 2 things. One, sort of growing things on a global scale and sort of, building more global interactions at the college level is really good. I think the thing that needs to happen, or one of the things that needs to happen there, is just doing it. I think there's a very decentralized structure, both here and globally. Europe, there's some efforts at organization, but there's like your UEM, which is a really nice group of people. But every country has their own leagues, and some countries have multiple collegiate leagues. Just like in the States, for example, there's like 10 different collegiate leagues, and conferences have their own leagues, and even pro teams are having leagues. Like everyone's doing everything. There's just a very like decentralized structure. So I think I think some sort of unification, and I don't mean this in the sense that like one organization needs to like dominate the scene, because I don't think that's good either. But I think some way for people to work together, A, work together, B, talk more, and then like in competition have some sort of unity. Whether that ends up results in like a sort of neutral party, like let's say Twitch, for example, hosting a global championship for Fortnite, where maybe there's like 15 American leagues and 10 European leagues, and whatever the case may be, but sort of like everyone kind of culminates in a centralized place at the end of the day, that's sort of operated by a more neutral party. So it's not like, play versus CSL, or UEM versus whatever else, right? I think that's a step that I think the scene needs, because at that point it gives teams and players choice, and I think that's a good thing. Players can play in the leagues they want to play in, and also we don't face the same problem as traditional athletics, where like there's the NCAA if you're a basketball player, and that's basically like you're playing here and that's it, and you play your one game and that's all you play. With esports, obviously, if I want to play 10 hours of Rainbow Six a day, I can play 10 hours of Rainbow Six a day. And if I want to play 3 competitive matches a week, there's 3 leagues, I can play in all of them. Or if I don't have that much time, I can play in one of them. But the cool thing is like there is choice. So that's nice. The other thing I think that is really important is just trying to and I know Wim might have talked about this, because Wim has talked about this a lot, and a lot of people are, but creating a more cohesive ecosystem, like overall, within the esports scene, and not to use this cliche term, but like path to pro. I think that's something that needs to be developed a lot more. Really interestingly, FACEIT's really big proponent of that. FPL for CS:GO is like insanely popular, and that's sort of FACEIT's sort of path to pro for CS:GO players. And that's run now for several years, and some of the top CS:GO players in the world sort of started competitively through the FPL system, and they leveled up and became recruited and things like that. College needs more established pathways like that, and we're already seeing in North America, college players are getting picked up by pro teams. Like this is happening now on a small scale, and it can happen on a much larger scale if there's buy-in from publishers to sort of create those ecosystems and work with people to build those ecosystems. Not to say that every collegiate esports player wants to go pro, because actually, sorry, like actually going on a tangent right now. But,
that's okay, keep going.
But interestingly enough, if you take survey data, which I've done many times, only about 10% of players actually aspire to go pro. A huge majority of like college players are doing this because they like competing, but not for the sake of like I aspire to be a pro gamer, but like I'm competing because competing is just fun. And it's like an organized thing to do with my friends, and it's just like there's a thrill in competition. And the great thing about college is that I can compete against people in my same situation at my same level. So like the games are more meaningful, like you can, you're a tennis player. So I'm like, okay, I play tennis too. I'm really bad. And I can want to compete in tennis all day, but if I'm competing against Federer, it's not going to be fun for me because I'm losing every time. But if I'm competing against, the 3-0s at my local tennis league, like I'm playing in meaningful games. If I win, I get a trophy, and it's like, it's super cool. So collegiate esports gives that feeling to people. But for those that do aspire to be pros, allowing the collegiate space to provide an actual pathway is really valuable, not just in North America, but globally too. I know that some Filipino League of Legends players, I believe, who started in collegiate, got picked up by, I can't remember the names of the team now, but some of the top Filipino League of Legends players like started as college players. So again,
it's interesting. Wim definitely spoke about that. He spoke about having players, I think it was around Call of Duty, move up and have a chance within a professional competition. And most of the time, it wasn't so much that they were successful when they got there, but it was more about that exposure and opportunity. So he did speak to us a little bit about that.
Yeah.
And I think I'm starting to hear a pretty common trend with people around your level talking about the unification. We've had a guy called Carl Jenkins, who's a esports manager at Colorado Western in the US, talk about if he had the power to do so, he would love to see, I guess, some sort of system above that just helped organize things a little clearer and a little cleaner. I think that's similar to what you're saying, is that you don't want someone controlling the whole thing, but it is having that, I guess, that connection between everyone to work together. If you were in a position and you had almighty power, you were an esports god, what would be the the top three things you would change or make better?
In the industry overall,
Yeah.
um, I think probably the first one would be inclusivity across the board. EG just announced like a multi-gendered Valorant team, super cool. I would like if I could snap my fingers and change anything, probably the first one would be that, to create more opportunities for like women and people of color, um, to sort of like be involved in meaningful ways in esports in any capacity, whether it be like as players or like in sort of in management roles and in full-time capacities as casters or whatever the roles are. There's like a job for anyone for anything. So that would be the first thing I would I would change, um, especially because like you know various like different perspectives always bring about and help foster like positive change more quickly than not, right? So that would be good. I think a second thing that I would change is, um, for publishers to be more amenable to working with third parties. Right now, you see like a bevy of different approaches from publishers, like the Valve approach of like, we are completely hands off, to the Riot approach of like, we are controlling everything. I think there is like a middle ground that is going to be beneficial for everybody. I think I understand like a lot of the Riot perspective of like really quality control and brand message control, and that makes sense. I understand the desire for that as a company, but I feel like the result of this ends up being negative ultimately, because it creates a situation where like the community is sort of codependent on the publisher. Like this this League of Legends tournament is not run by Riot, so it doesn't get the attention, it doesn't get the interest, and people don't take it as seriously because they're conditioned to only do like, if it's not Riot, it's not good. And I think that doesn't help grow the scene as much, because again, like similar to the idea of inclusivity, there are third parties that could have really cool innovative ideas and things that they want to do and whatnot, but they feel inhibited by publishers, where like Nintendo blocks tournaments from running because they're using Slippy, which is like the the guy that basically like rebuilt the netcode for playing Melee online. That's better than Nintendo's own netcode. So people play that, but Nintendo doesn't like it, so they shut down, and don't promote and don't encourage tournaments that are using it. So it's like that. Why? That doesn't help anything. That's the second thing I would change. And then the third thing, the third thing I would change is I guess just like more transparency, transparency in information to people. I think one of the big problems in esports, and now this is like really off topic of where we started, but one of the hugest problems in this industry is the fact that it's such a young industry, and it can be very exploitative, and that I think is a huge issue. Not just because a lot of young people get exploited or potentially exploited or taken advantage of, like let's rely on a bunch of volunteer labor and things like that. But it sends bad messages, and it really stunts the growth of esports overall, because one really bad story, can set the entire industry back. With like mainstream media picks up on something, that then harms the credibility of esports as a whole in the eyes of like the rest of the world, and that sucks really. So it's not just about, it sucks for the people that are young that like get bad contracts and they can't afford a lawyer, and they sign these like really shitty agreements with like predatory teams, and especially like games like Fortnite where the player base is really young. So it sucks for those people. So I wish that there was better access to information. But for the whole scene, it's actually just not good. Because every bad thing that happens just like makes it that much harder for esports to be sort of taken seriously at sort of a macro level.
Yeah,
So those are probably my three biggest things I would
no,
change.
some pretty. I mean, those are things we need to. I mean, for Luke and I to understand, and I think audience who's new to esports, stuff that without being highly involved and in those situations and going through, seeing those experiences happen around you is really hard. We've run out of time, and I just want to say before we go, thank you so much. But also, how can anyone listening follow what you're doing and follow what's happening with your work at FACEIT?
My Twitter, probably FACEIT Duran, is probably the the best way. I tweet about food and my dog and esports and basketball and stocks and politics. So it's like kind of a mixture of a bunch of things, but like I usually will tweet about stuff I'm doing professionally there, or just like check out stuff that FACEIT is doing. It's been a fun, getting close to a year now that I've been with FACEIT, and yeah, I've very much enjoyed my experience so far, and we're doing a lot of super cool stuff. So yeah, I'm pretty excited. So yeah, anything you can do to check FACEIT out, or yeah, my Twitter really.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your insight.
Thank you.
It's actually quite inspiring. I mean, Luke and I are in a position where we're trying to do something different and build something ourselves. So to hear someone go through those experiences, push through and grind is really, it's quite uplifting. So thank you for your time, and see you down the track.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.